You're listening to Puma Podcast.
Hi, I'm Franco Luna, Puma Podcast. You're listening to Teka Teka News, balitang thinking, hindi breaking. In this episode,
there's actually a theme when you go here in San Nicolas, trade and revolution. Kasi here you go for trading, and at the same time, it also became a cradle of revolution. Which, for one example of which, you get to see the birthplace of Antonio Luna. Over towards the tail end of this neighborhood, you get to see the foundation site of the Katipunan itself.
join me as I explore the iconic San Nicolas district in Manila with the help of a heritage conservationist.
Arriving at Recto Terminal Station. Paparating na sa Recto Terminal Station.
Recto Station, last station po, mga bababa po ng Recto Station, last station na po, double check po natin mga personal.
Good afternoon. It is 1:28 p.m. I'm sitting here in the Plaza San Lorenzo in front of the Binondo Church. Across from the San Fernando Bridge, I am waiting for Stephen Pamorada of the Heritage Collective. In a bit, we're gonna walk through the Pansiteria Macanista de Buen Gusto, which is a building of historical significance right here in Manila City that has yet to be declared a heritage structure.
Stephen John Pamorada co-owns a heritage concept store based in Escolta, Manila. He was taking me on a short walking tour of the iconic San Nicolas district, which is often called Manila's Heritage District, and for good reason. Heritage houses sporting Spanish-era architecture are still concentrated in the area, which was relatively untouched by World War II.
Oh, now that was not, sir, that was not parang destroyed by the war. Kasi only on this side, mas marami nasira ng war. Parang there were just some certain bombs that na punta dito sa San Nicolas that burned certain parts but not in its entirety.
But this area survived.
Has survived to the point that in the 60s or even after the war, they could have considered this as parang vegan yung look niya. Continuous yung mga structures.
Our first stop on the audio tour was the Pansiteria Macanista de Buen Gusto, or at least what was left of it.
So ito na nga, I'm standing on the San Fernando Bridge, no?
San Fernando Bridge.
On the way to the San Nicolas district, across from the structure. I guess earlier I should have said we're visiting what remains of the Pansiteria Macanista de Buen Gusto, because what I see before me is it's really far from its glory days. It's really not the same structure it was. It's an old, dilapidated, three-story wooden house. It's seen better days.
But this place is historically important because Jose Rizal even name-dropped it in El Filibusterismo. Yes, the same novel that sparked the revolution and altered the course of history.
So, in terms of its architectural significance, of course, we all know of these kinds of architecture as the parang Spanish-style Filipino houses. But in this case, this one is 3 stories high. Typically, when we see ancestral houses na similar to this kind of form, it's usually 2 stories high lang. So, in terms of rarity, this is actually the only one remaining na 3 stories high na structure dating back to the Spanish colonial period in this side of Manila.
So what happens next? What's next for the Pansiteria Macanista?
We just need to keep an eye on this. And then for the government to actually, start their action na if you want to buy this out, do buy it out na. And at the same time, restore it na. So I think I will follow up with them perhaps in the future.
From there, we moved to the San Fernando Bridge fronting the Pansiteria, which I didn't know is also linked to our national hero. Listen to Stephen explain it.
One of Rizal's friends, si Hihino Francisco, sa kanya binigay ni Rizal yung original manuscript ng Noli Me Tangere. And then parang because of the parang raiding of the Spaniards or basta the authorities during that time, syempre, yung mismong manuscript is very, parang subversive, so to speak. Which is why, parang tinago ni Gino Francisco elsewhere yung manuscript out of fear na makuha yung Noli Me Tangere. Did you know what he did?
What did he do?
Nilagay niya sa ilalim ng bridge na to. Tinago niya. Desperately nilagay sa ilalim. Parang, according to the accounts, parang he risked his life to really desperately hide it right under this bridge. I don't know.
Most residents don't know it, but there are remnants of that distant history under their roads too.
So
Yun yung
even this
kwento.
bridge we're standing on,
This is something historical
it's
as
a
well.
historical, it should
Yet
be an historical
even
structure.
yung the asphalt na pavement that you see here,
Yeah.
underneath that, nung medyo merong may sira yung asphalt na to, makita mo cobblestone yan.
Oh, wow.
Cobblestone, and alongside that, merong parang may rusty line na passing through this. Apparently, that's actually the Tranvia truck
Oh,
all
wow.
the way here. So it's just covered by this. Maybe it's just there, basically.
From there, we moved to Santo Cristo Street along the banks of the Estero de Binondo. Today, that area now houses the main building of the South San Nicolas Volunteer Fire Brigade and a local bank branch. Stephen says this area is of great importance to the local Filchay community in the Philippines.
This is actually the quarantine island for the Chinese who are coming to the Philippines, parang Chinese settlers. So before they land here in this area, they'll go first to a quarantine facility. But before, you need yourself to be quarantined. It's because Chinese before are considered both culturally and in terms of parang individually as parang impure. So to the point,
was that racial?
racial discrimination, so to speak,
Yeah.
to the point that the Spaniards would actually disinfect them. Parang they will power wash them with disinfectant, and that's a stingy disinfectant.
Now, Bye Bridge is significant to the Chinese because it was where the early immigrants, our ancestors, came on shore after quarantine on Engineer Island. On the spot where they came ashore now stands a BDO building and the fire station. Close by the shore was an area once known as Engineer Island, which was more commonly called the Water House by immigrants. That's because this is where they were hosed down with water and deloused with disinfectant after a grueling journey aboard ships. That island is now Baseco.
Depending on how sadistic that Spaniard na assigned to you for the quarantining process, it will take you not just days to power wash you, it will take you sometime days or weeks or borderline towards a month. It's not really a walk in the park for the earlier Chinese settlers here in the Philippines because then again, the Chinese were looking for a greener pasture. From the quarantining process, they would be escorted inside towards this estero, diba? Again, there's a creek here, and then they would land here by the Bye Bridge.
Here, right
on
where we're
this spot.
standing.
Which is why, itong spot na to where we are at, basically, this is the spot where they would have themselves registered in the immigration process and all that. This is the first time that they would land here as if they've first seen the Philippines for the first time.
Quarantine is an exercise of shared responsibility today thanks to COVID-19. But at the time, it was seen as a symbol of Spanish racism. Stephen says not many of the local Filipino-Chinese communities still remember what happened in that area all those years ago.
So itong spot na to, nobody knows na parang walang marker that talks about this spot na very important to the Chinese-Filipino community. Along the way, of course, the Chinese businessmen would consider, let's just modernize everything. So that's why we'll see parang the structure, most of the structures here are parang brutalist style. Same ng architecture nila, CCP, Marcos period, na you could only imagine lahat yun, dinemolish na ng mga 1970s to 1980s. Pero imagine in the past, lahat yun, rows of ancestral houses.
We're pausing for a quick break now. When we return, we go deeper into the San Nicolas district. From there, we passed by an ancestral house that just happened to be the birthplace of General Antonio Luna. That one had a historical marker by the National Historical Commission.
It's a two-story ancestral home. I guess I would say, no, traditional Spanish architecture, no, the second floor sticking out just a little bit. Philippine flags are hanging from the second floor, but just like we saw in the Pansiteria, they're torn and frayed, not in the best condition. There are holes on the windows. The sheet metal that serves as the roof is getting rusty also. The front door is also barricaded. But it's still here, it's still standing. And there is a plaque. The caretaker of the place did tell us that it's privately owned now.
Nung
Historical.
araw nung di ba naging tourism secretary si Gordon.
Si Gordon.
Siya nag-attempt niyan. Ngayon, sumurinder parang narinig ko wala daw budget. Tauhan nila pa, punta-punta lang dito para lilinisan lang yan. Malalapad ang sahig niyan Mapipintag.
Pero ano pa rin, kumbaga buong buo pa rin yung bahay.
Buong buo yan. Puro original pa yan. Ako dito lang ako sa labas.
Yan si Elpidio Donato. Kagawad siya ng Barangay 282 sa Maynila. He's also the caretaker of the house. Sabi ni Kagawad Elpidio, naging office space na lang yung bahay. Bodega na lang daw ng lumang gamit. Next up, we stopped by the Pedro Guevara Elementary School along San Fernando. It's a public school today, but it was actually built on the remains of the Real Alcaiceria de San Fernando. It was built way back in 1762 and was meant to be a marketplace for Chinese silk traders and later a quartermaster depot or a supply and distribution outpost under the Americans.
This is just the casted version of the original, which is now in National Museum. This is like the marker. Imagine there used to be a silk market, and then in front of the entrance, like this is like the marker of that silk market. So, parang ano lang, a dedication to that market, and then you can see the year 1762. So imagine this is made out of granite stone. This is now cemented. This particular, you need 10 people to actually carry the whole slab.
But that's not the only piece of the Alcaiceria still left in that plot of land.
Every time there's a construction of a school building here, you can always uncover lots of archaeological artifacts on this site. And it's like layers of history, starting from the Chinese settlers, then the Spanish authorities, then the American colonial period. So gets mo, imagine mo kahit mag-dig ka lang under that, may makikita kang it's like the hidden treasure of San Nicolas. That's how rich this place is.
The government never properly excavated it, so teachers still find things like porcelain scraps and weapon parts from time to time. Stephen says nothing has been done to catalog and study them to this day. So one untrained teacher who just happened to be a history buff took it upon himself to do just that.
The excavation niya, it's only parang done out of passion ni Teacher Wilven, who actually curates the museum here.
Who is one of the teachers here?
One of the teachers here. Yung parang ano siya, livelihood education teacher siya. Now, ano siya, self-taught archaeologist.
So passion project niya talaga
Medyo
ito.
passion project na parang wala siyang budget, pero siya na lang nagpundar lahat nun.
As the years went by, the artifacts piled up and could no longer fit in one room. So the school allowed Teacher Wilven to put up a small museum there. Our last stop was quite unique. It was the final resting place of Teodora Alonso Rialonda, or the mother of Jose Rizal. Except you wouldn't know that just by looking at it. 2 plaques out front say so, but the building itself is now a 3-story office building housing trucks up front. That's because the original house that was once there had already been demolished to make space for a warehouse. It isn't just where Rizal's mother passed.
When Rizal, di ba, Rizal was shot in Luneta, and his body was buried in Paco Park. From Paco Park, it was exhumed. It was placed here. Tapos by 1912, dito nag-start yung procession nung bones niya ceremonially, kasi before wala namang state funeral for Rizal. So belated state funeral siya starting from here
When he was recognized as a
as
national,
national hero na, all the way down to Intramuros where he stayed for overnight yung parang vigil before he was laid to his final resting place in Luneta. Dito nag-start
Yeah.
procession. So important tong space na to.
Yeah.
Ganun siya.
Tapos ngayon, naging garahe na lang ano.
The deeper we went into the San Nicolas district, the clearer it became that our culture has not been kind to some heritage structures. The resting place of Rizal's mother, for example, had 2 plaques commemorating it, but that was all. The Pansiteria Macanista had none. I mean, many of the places we visited weren't even marked on Google Maps. You can check this for yourself too.
On
This
this
area.
parcel of land, but
Yes.
were any of the structures from back then still
Sure.
remaining today?
Wala na ngayon. Of
Not-
course,
not
many
even this
things
one.
happened before. Well, I think I would assume most of them have actually survived the war, but throughout the years after the war, you get to see all these things.
Right.
They got demolished.
Did you ever try asking people nearby, like, kunwari if we went up to this guard right now, or yung caretaker ng Pansiteria Macanista,
Oo.
if they knew about the historical significance?
For sure, no. For sure,
no.
You need to parang emphasize na, alam niyo bang importante yung nasa harapan ng building nyo?
Under the law, heritage agencies like the National Museum of the Philippines have the power to designate heritage sites as national cultural treasures, which lets them buy the property and reject any developments on those lots. Local governments can also sign ordinances giving the private owners of heritage sites tax incentives. Except heritage agencies in both the national and local government haven't been aggressive enough in claiming these cultural treasures. Here's Stephen again.
It's usually parang viewed as it's an old house, it's a dilapidated house. So yun lagi yung concern na parang even at that kind of level, parang it's usually thought of as a negative thing kasi it's against development. Pag unlad ba na parang tinatanggal mo or inaalis mo sa consciousness mo and sa lugar natin yung mga heritage building that supposedly talk about our grand history when we all know na much have been already destroyed.
And that was today's episode of Teka Teka News. Again, I'm Franco Luna. This episode was edited by Pidoy Blanco. If you like this episode, share it with a friend or two. In case you want to learn more, we actually did an earlier episode on the Pansiteria Macanista de Buen Gusto on Teka Teka News. That's also on this Spotify channel or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, don't forget to follow Teka Teka News and Puma Podcast on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube. Thanks for listening.